Welcome to ExplainerCast, episode 20. I'm your host, Dave Smith.
And this is Shane Swenson.
And we have some explaining to do. Today, we're going to be talking about skiing.
Yeah. This is what I guess we have to get excited about now because it started snowing and all the bike trails are covered in snow and ice. So, time for something new.
You have to move down the trails with a different vehicle.
That's right. Same idea, different tools.
Yes, and colder.
Yeah, there is that.
So, skis. What is a ski?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. Our definition of a ski would be a relatively flat device that is used to enable sliding transport over the ground, and in this case, snow skis, so specifically over snow.
Okay. It's very good. Anytime I find that we try to define something, the universe always likes to create something else that fits the definition that you did not intend.
Right.
But I can't think of any examples. I think you did pretty good.
Yeah, and I thought I knew what we were going to talk about, and as soon as you said that, because we're going to talk about sort of people on snow skis, but I pictured snowmobiles and airplanes and sleds and all kinds of other things that have skis on them. So try to be inclusive in that regard. But yeah, today we're going to talk specifically about skis that you strap to your feet, most likely, and then somehow cruise down a mountain, so specifically, I guess, downhill skiing, because there is also cross-country skiing where you're on typically more flat ground. And we can mention those, but I think we were both kind of excited about the mountains gaining their snowpack right now and what that means at the ski resorts.
Exactly. And we're talking, I guess, would this be called alpine skiing? Is that the right way?
Yeah. And actually, other types of skiing, of course, there's water skis and things like that. So we'll talk about frozen, water and snow form. And for people skiing, there are two broad categories, alpine and Nordic. So alpine meaning in the mountains. So typically that's down the hill, though there are forms where you first go up the hill and then back down on your skis, sometimes called alpine touring or randonnée. And then Nordic skiing refers to what we often call cross-country skiing. So that can be still in the mountains, but is often on a flatter surface where you're pushing yourself along with the skis and your ski poles.
Perfect. All right. Well, I don't know. I think you, Shane, are the expert in this area. I am a skier, but intermediate at best. So I think this might just take the form of me asking you questions.
Yeah, maybe so.
More so than explaining anything.
I mean, we both have our empirical experience with this, of course. And yeah, I'm definitely a student of how skis work and have been doing it for quite a while. But yeah, let's work our way through it. So yeah, where do you want to start?
I love the physics, and I would like to understand what makes a ski actually ski. Why is it that I can put a ski on my foot and go on snow and I slide, but I put that same ski on my same foot and I put it on dirt and I don't go anywhere?
Yeah, I like it. In almost all contexts, when we talk about skis, we're talking about this special property they have that they can slide, like a water ski can slide over water, a snow ski can slide over snow. So let's go there. So skis have a few things they have to do. The first one is they have to support us. They have to keep us on top of the snowpack. And if we're on a hard packed snow surface, maybe a relatively small ski or even your boot or your foot could work. In deeper, softer snow, you need a bigger ski to simply stay on top of the snow and not to sink down into it. And that's useful, but of course the fun happens when you're able to slide, and maybe to go even further, when you're able to slide in a controlled fashion. So maybe if we take those three components separately, we can kind of work our way in. The first is how do you stay on top? And that really is through surface area. Like a snowshoe is another way of staying on top. It's just a big thing that you put on your foot. And with more surface area that you're pressing down on, you gain enough support from the snowpack to stay on top.
And is that a function of pressure, ultimately?
Yeah, I think it basically comes down to weight per area. So call it pounds per square inch in our units here in the US. And the surface you're on, whether it, like say a snowpack, will be able to support a certain amount of pressure, pounds per square inch. And you need to have skis that are big enough, they distribute your total weight over enough area to reduce that to a acceptable number.
Got it. I mean, if you put a pair of ice skates on and then stood in the snow, you would just sink.
Yeah. And in fact, we should talk about skating sometime. Like ice skates work in almost the opposite way, which is they concentrate your weight onto such a small area, you get enough pressure to melt the ice under your foot, and that's what you're gliding over, is that little layer of melted ice.
Aha.
So it's still a pressure game, just in the other way.
And carving into a little to be able to actually like push off.
Yeah, and then you get grip as well from the blade, the sharpened aspect. Yeah. But like a ski on cold ice won't glide as well as a skate would, because the skate is able to put the pressure on the ice. But you're right, on the flip side, a skate in snow is just going to sink in and stop immediately.
Okay, so we've covered how to stay on top.
Yep.
Got that.
So then I think next was how to slide.
Okay.
And this is where, like you said, on mud or dirt, it's not going to work as well because of friction. And one downside with more surface area is you potentially actually have more friction. And when we talked about vehicle driving and cars, often that's the game. You want a bigger, stickier tire contact patch with the ground in order to gain more traction. And here we want the larger surface area for that flotation aspect, but we now need to make that larger surface slide as opposed to stick on the snow. And there are a couple of things that I know of. And again, this is an area where we talked, I don't know the full details, but there's a couple things that work in our favor. The first is that the bottom of the ski is relatively smooth. So if you had like a very coarse structure, like if the bottom of your ski was coated in like carpeting or something, or like felt, it's going to grip. And in fact, there are certain aspects where like people want to ski up a mountain sort of by walking uphill step by step, where you'll put something on the ski that makes it grip the snow. And people have used different materials over the years. Sealskin was one of the materials they used to use because it'll slide one direction, but then when you go against the fur, it'll stop. But when we go down...
Interesting.
Yeah, we could talk about that.
I think I've heard that called skinning, right?
Exactly. It's called skinning. You put this material on the bottom of your ski so that basically the fibers of the hairs point toward the back of the ski. And so as you slide forward, it slides and glides nicely, but then all those little hairs will grip the snow and support your weight as you step up to take the next step. And then usually you remove those when you get to the top so that you can slide down on what's called the base of the ski. And most modern ski bases are made out of some type of plastic, and it's meant to be fairly smooth so that by default there's less mechanical friction as compared to if it were a rough surface. However, perfectly smooth doesn't work the best. And this is where I don't fully understand the physics, but if it's perfectly smooth, you actually can kind of get sort of like a stickiness property. And so often there's a little bit of slight, they call it structure, but just a slight texture put into the base that typically moves linearly along the ski to kind of help it, I think, release some of the, like if you get a film of water on it, it kind of gives some channels or ways for that film to dissipate so that it doesn't kind of lock you onto the snow. And then the other very important property is most skis have a wax material applied to the base. And this is where we're definitely out of my element, but the wax is hydrophobic, which means it's going to repel water. And I think that may also help to prevent you from sort of sticking to the snow, but it also friction perhaps effect as well. Whereas the ski is sliding over the snow, there is a little bit of friction, and perhaps that creates a thin layer of melted snow, a little bit of water to kind of act as like a bearing between the ski base and the snow itself. And so a properly tuned ski that has an appropriate base texture, structure, and appropriately applied wax will glide better than a perfectly smooth base and an unwaxed base would glide. And that's when you get the most sort of magic, where you just feel like this effortless gliding over snow is happening.
Awesome. I want to ask Shane, and this is kind of a hypothetical question, treading into unknown territory here,
okay.
But you mentioned that a perfectly smooth ski bottom, unwaxed, might not actually slide as effortlessly or with as low of friction as one that has structure. You use the term structure.
Yep.
And I recently encountered a phenomenon with a tool called a gauge block. Are you familiar with these?
I've heard of these. Yeah.
These are like super accurately milled pieces of metal in like little rectangles.
Yep.
And one of the faces is almost perfectly flat.
Yeah.
So much so that if you put two of them and you just press them together, they actually, for reasons that no one knows, they stick to each other.
Yep.
And I wonder if a similar physical phenomenon is happening here with snow on a perfectly smooth ski bottom.
Yeah, I could see it being at least analogous, if not the same. And it's crazy how we don't actually understand what happens at those like molecular interactive levels.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems like, and I've seen a little bit on gauge blocks, like there again are the interactions between the molecules. I don't know exactly which forces are involved. And then you think about if you needed to peel them apart, you might have a very small but highly multiplicative force you're working against, because each kind of molecule pair that get very close together are interacting. And sometimes you kind of have to break the symmetry. Like a lot of times when you have something that's very strong, if you can introduce a flaw, like tearing the edge of a piece of paper, you can tear the whole sheet of paper by propagating that flaw through it. But with those highly refined surfaces, you would sort of have to, if you could bend them and peel them apart, it might be relatively easy to pull them apart. But forcing all of their molecular interactions to release essentially at the same time may be part of what makes that really difficult.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if with skis it's a similar thing, is like that structure will break the symmetry so that some parts are releasing first and some later, and also providing like just a channel, like a place for like that water film to actually migrate to so that it can kind of get out of the way.
Yeah, interesting.
But that's in the heuristic land for me. I wish I knew.
Yeah. Yeah, me neither. Me too. Okay, let's continue on to the next principle here.
Okay. So we got flotation, we're sliding, and there's more we can go into, but let's cover the bases first. The third item I mentioned was control. So I don't know have you gone sledding much, like on the local hills, Dave?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And how much control do you have like in a sled, especially like one of those circular saucer sleds?
Oh, like the only control I can exert is actually using my hands or feet to peg down the snow and try to introduce friction on one side or the other.
Yeah.
And even that is like just kind of a hope for control more so than anything.
Exactly. And so, yeah, you want like either a well understood path you're going to follow or a wide open field so that you're not going to hit a tree or bounce off a rock. And so with skis, we do want much more control than that. And this is where a couple things come into play. So one of them is, of course, the binding gives you a very firm attachment to the ski. And by the binding, we mean some mechanisms on the top face of the ski, the top sheet of the ski, that interact with a boot that you're wearing. And they essentially hold your foot onto the ski so that however you kind of tip or turn the boot, the ski is going to tip or turn with it. So that gives you at least an opportunity to control. And then the ski itself is designed to support high controllability. And partly this is done through the shape of the ski, and partly it's done through what are called the edges of the ski. So again, we have a ski, it's usually longer than it is wide, and you're attached to the top center surface of it. The base is underneath against the snow. And around the outside edges of the ski, down at the base, you often have a thin strip of metal called your edge. And that strip of metal interacts with the snow, and especially like sort of the hard packed snow or ice that you might be on, so that when you tip the ski a little bit onto one of its edges, and we talk about the inside edge where like your big toe and your instep are, or the outside edge where your little toe and the outside of your foot are, when you tip or lean the ski onto either of those edges, that metal edge begins to interact with the snow, and it provides a mechanism to sort of grip and apply friction. It's actually kind of similar to how we were talking about vehicle dynamics with cars, where we want to have very little resistance moving forward or backward perhaps, but let's say forward. But we want to exert resistance in sideways or lateral movement. And the edges are the key to providing that resistance. The more you tip onto the edge and it digs into the snow, the more resistance it's going to present to lateral movement. And we can then use that to slow down by kind of using it as a brake, or to turn and change direction by either just sliding it across the snow, which causes still a force perpendicular to our direction of travel, which we can use to turn the ski and turn our trajectory. Or we can actually use the shape of the ski and put that edge to work in what's called a carving maneuver. And the way we carve is often skis will have what's called side cut, where the tip and the tail are wider. Like if you're looking down at it from above, the tip is wider, the tail is wider, and the waist or the center of the ski is narrower. So it has an arc kind of cut out of it. That's why they call it a side cut. And when you tip the ski onto the edge, your weight and the weight of gravity is pushing your foot onto the snow still. And so that tip and tail being wider causes a natural bend in the ski where you'll introduce what's called camber into the ski. So where your foot is placed in the middle of the ski, you'll be kind of pushing outward, and the tip and tail will kind of be bent inward in the direction that you've leaned. And so as that edge is following that curved path on the snow, it's going to naturally cause you to curve as well. And you can essentially what's called carve a turn, where from the tip through the waist to the tail of the ski, they're all following like the same track. And if you do this with both feet at the same time, one inside, one outside, you'll essentially make a pair of curved lines that look a lot like railroad tracks. And you can generate a lot of inward force and thus turn at very high speed doing this maneuver.
This is one of the coolest things in skiing, when you just nail a perfect carve.
Yeah.
It's quiet, it's smooth, and it's super in control.
Yep.
And I've done this, of course, but I had never actually realized that the reason it works is because your body is deforming the shape of the ski to make an arc.
An arc, yeah. Negative camber.
That arc actually governs the turning radius of the turn.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. And so skis are built for different purposes, and one of the design considerations is what turn shape they want to optimize for. And so a ski that's designed for very tight turns on very hard snow, like a slalom race ski, will have a relatively short length and a relatively large side cut, meaning the ratio or the difference in size from the width of the tip and tail compared to the waist, there'll be a large difference, kind of an hourglass shape to the ski. And that allows you to put a lot of bend and curve into the ski and grip the snow in a tight turn. On the other hand, if you want to optimize for very large radius, so much less tight turns, then a longer ski with a shallower side cut, less difference between the tip and the waist and the tail widths, will result in a naturally longer turn because the arc radius is so much larger. And nowadays when you buy skis, they'll often report, as part of the specifications of the skis, they'll report the width of the tip, waist, and tail, and they'll often tell you what its kind of design or natural turn radius is.
Oh, cool.
You can choose to turn a wider or a tighter turn by either, to make a wider turn, you just kind of lean less and don't put the full bend into the ski. And if you want to turn sharper, you then have to induce some part of the ski to slide. And you can kind of force the ski to either just turn more than it would want to, or you can like slide the tail of the ski in particular, and you're essentially kind of oversteering, like we talked about with cars, where the back end of the car is kind of pushing out to the side, so the car is rotating faster than your tires would be turning it. You can do the same thing with skis. You can kind of release the rear, the tail, and skid around a turn to make it sharper. Or with enough technique, you can kind of force the ski to sort of act as if it was turning sharper by kind of, I'm thinking of how to best describe it. You can sort of force it to like kind of dig a sharper arc than the natural ski radius would present. Yeah, it's a little unsatisfying to be able to know how to do something but not explain it.
Yeah, it is. That's kind of the nature of skiing. It's like if someone asked me to teach you to ski, I'd be like, I don't know how to do that. I just know how to do it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I couldn't teach you to walk either. If you ask me, like, what are the steps? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good metaphor. Like when you think about walking. When I was in junior high, and I learned to skate when I was very young, and I played ice hockey all growing up. And when I was in junior high, I had some friends who wanted me to teach them how to skate. And I was a very good skater, but a terrible teacher, because it was 100% intuitive. And it didn't work to say, well, just lean more or just like push harder. Like that's how I conceived of it. But of course that didn't explain what you actually had to do.
Your body's doing 100 things you're not talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, try to explain how to walk to somebody like, oh, you just put your leg forward. Well, not exactly. You're like, it's like a controlled fall that you go catch and then you do it again. And in a perfect rhythm. Yeah.
Right. Well, which part of your foot hits the ground first? Like, I don't even think about that.
Exactly.
You know, like what's the foot angle when you leave the ground with the back foot? Like, I don't know. I never think about that.
Yeah, and what do you do with your arms? And yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You need to make your arms exactly mimic the other foot.
Right. Yeah. Perfectly counter
man.
pendulum. Yep.
Yes. Welcome to skiing. So the purpose of this episode is not to teach anyone how to ski, but to explain how the skiing works.
That's right.
And I think hopefully it's informative to people who actually already know how to ski and are now hopefully getting a sense for what the actual physics are going on behind all the intuition that they've developed.
Yeah, exactly. And how it works, and then maybe how you can tweak it. And one of the interesting things, especially with carving, and I think what makes it a little bit hard to access at first, is there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, because you want to curve the ski, but to curve the ski, you need to apply pressure onto the edge that's kind of a lateral pressure. And to truly apply that lateral pressure, you need to be turning. And so
yeah, exactly.
To go from not turning,
so you have to
go. Yeah,
it's like a faith fall to get started, right? Like you have to lean into it, hoping that the physics will restore you.
Yeah,
when you complete the turn,
and to do it the exact right amount in balance, and to be able to adjust it if you get it wrong. And yeah, it's totally a trust fall. And I know when I was trying to learn to carve, like, yeah, sometimes it wouldn't be there, and you just like fall splat, and you feel pretty silly about it. Until you finally get kind of that intuition of, I know it's going to work. And thus with that confidence, you can actually commit to it, which is actually what enables it to work, and then appreciate the outcome.
You have to have faith.
but
and then take the step.
Yeah. But well-placed faith, like total random, just, I'm going to lean into this. It might work. It might not.
Yeah. Yes. Very interesting. So there are so many forces at play, Shane, and I thought it might be interesting to just kind of enumerate all of them. Let's just take the carve scenario. You're going to do a gentle carve.
Yeah.
You're going down, so you're moving downhill. Yep. The force of gravity is acting upon you from your center of gravity, which is not at the skis. It's up somewhere much higher than the skis along your body.
Yep.
And it's pulling you directly to the center of the earth.
That's right.
But there's a slope that you're on, which means that only a portion of that gravity pull is actually propelling you down that slope. So then, now what?
I mean, this is why alpine skiing doesn't work so well on flat ground, because if you're being pulled straight down on flat ground, you're going to stay where you are.
Well, you are. Yeah, exactly.
And if this was like a perfectly vertical cliff, which has its own problems, it's all down and it's all acceleration. So typically and
you have nothing really pulling you to the wall in that scenario.
Yeah, and so unfortunately it's not stable
ground
either. Yeah, you're not going to stick to the ground. So the in-between is where we like it, where gravity is both keeping you in contact with the snow, but there's essentially, if you were to decompose that gravity vector into two perpendicular components, one component called the normal component, which is perpendicular to the snow, and then the other called the tangent component, which is parallel to the slope, essentially pointing down the hill. The fraction of the gravity vector that's pulling you down the hill, that tangent component, is the acceleration you're going to experience. And if there were no friction, no air resistance, you would continue to accelerate based on that component of force until you hit something. And
yeah, like the speed of light.
Yeah, exactly. Or the bottom of the hill, but yeah, something.
I'm just kidding. Yes.
If you went far enough.
Got you. Either one of those things will stop you from accelerating.
Yeah. If this was a black hole, then you're like diving in toward it. Yeah, you might hit the speed of light. So
right.
So then what opposes this acceleration and eventually causes us to reach equilibrium is resistance. And we really face two principal forms of resistance here. One of them is actually air resistance. So a steep enough slope and going fast enough, air resistance is actually going to become a limiting factor. And this is why ski racers wear highly aerodynamic race suits. They're very form-fitting. And people that are trying to achieve like speed records will go to great lengths to build kind of an aerodynamic shape with their body, with their helmet, and so forth.
Like a teardrop shape.
Yeah, usually. Exactly. And you're going to hit what we would call terminal velocity, the fastest speed you can achieve with that acceleration and that air resistance. For standard recreational skiing, where you're probably wearing warm, more baggy clothes, you're going to feel that air resistance a lot sooner, depending on the angle of the slope. And even on a relatively steep slope, it's hard to go more than about 60 miles an hour, which is crazy fast, but just because of all the air resistance of all your clothes.
Yeah.
So that's one component. The other component is your skis on the snow. And so there's going to be friction. And really two kinds of friction. Your forward sliding friction, like if your skis are not well tuned, if you don't have the right formulation of wax. And I don't understand the physics of this, but there are different formulations of wax based on snow temperature that work optimally. As the snow is warmer, you tend to go to a softer, stickier wax. As the snow is colder, you go to like a harder wax that feels less sticky to the touch. And that'll actually it'll optimize, I'll say, your sliding ability in those conditions. And in general, warmer snow is faster than colder snow. I assume this is because maybe it melts a little more easily and you get that boundary layer of water with less energy input from the friction of your ski. So we've got sort of just a sliding friction that's going to slow us down once we're accelerated. And then another kind of friction, of course, is if we intentionally like turn the ski a little bit sideways compared to our direction of travel. We dig those edges in. In the extreme case, this is how you stop. You really kind of turn the ski sideways and really dig the edges in. Or a lot of times that can be used as a speed control mechanism where you turn kind of part way, skid the skis a little bit, dig the edges in a little bit, and you can kind of manage your speed through that additional resistance, which would be a friction force as well as kind of like a mechanical force as your ski is like scraping like the snow or ice with the edges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And actually one other way you can control speed is we don't usually just point it straight down the slope. So, our kind of simple model was, you're pointed down the slope. The other thing you can do is you can direct your travel across the slope, what we would call traversing. And as you traverse, even like say on a diagonal, you're effectively changing kind of the effective slope that your skis are skiing. So they're no longer pointed straight down the slope, which let's say it's like a 20 or a 30 degree incline. Now maybe you've made it seem to your skis like a 10 or 15 degree incline by going on a diagonal across the slope. And so as a result, the component of that gravitational force that is tangent to the slope in your direction of travel is going to be reduced accordingly. All the way to the extreme of if you go straight across the slope, even if it's a steep slope, you can kind of grip your edges into the slope. And by going straight across it, you'll effectively slow down due to friction until you stop. And then you can stand there, on the side of a mountain because your skis are preventing you from sliding down the hill sideways. And you pointed them essentially horizontally where there's no tangent force due to gravity that's going to accelerate you forward or backward.
Right. And then the other extreme of that, without even using any friction, is you can actually point your skis back uphill and then use the tangent force to slow you down. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you're going fast, you can carve a big turn until you're actually going somewhat back uphill and control your speed that way. And then either come to a stop or maybe you're at a comfortable speed now and now lean back down the hill to accelerate. And then you can kind of get that sort of recurring flow feeling of falling into a turn, catching it with a carve and feeling all that kind of pressure and force build up and the acceleration, and then release it into the next turn and sort of maintain a flow.
Awesome.
Oh, now I'm excited to go skiing.
I know. This is exactly what I was just thinking as you talked through it. I'm like, oh man, I got to get out on the slopes.
Yeah.
So now there's a new set of vectors of forces that are introduced when you enter a turn.
Okay.
And I don't know what they are, but I know they're there.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're right. So we've talked about kind of the straight sliding regime where it's basically gravity and friction or resistance, air resistance. When we start turning, we're introducing a centripetal acceleration, which means an acceleration that points toward the center of a circle.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my head, we were pointed down the hill, and now we've entered like a left-hand carving turn. So we've leaned our skis onto their left edges. So our left leg is on its little toe edge, our right leg is on the big toe edge. And as those skis are bending, and they're trying to trace that arc to the left. They're imparting a turning force, and what we're actually going to feel is we're going to feel an inward force up through the ski, through the boot, through our legs that is greater than the force of gravity itself. And so we talk about when you turn, you could talk about like how many G's you're pulling or what fraction of a G you're pulling. And you feel this very viscerally with skiing, that as you turn, the force is going to increase on your body. And it's due to the skis, again, pushing you toward the inside of that turn, and your body, as a result, sort of bending the ski further, because that push is being pushed somewhat by the tip of the tail towards you, and your foot is resisting it through your center of mass, through the waist of the ski. And that's part of what's imparting the arc on the ski as well. And if you do this at a high enough speed with a steep enough angle, you can feel a significant increase in that force. And that's what's accelerating you around the turn.
And also what's bending the ski, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
and
like
that's that chicken and egg
push,
problem.
The tighter the current.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. By enabling you to push harder back onto the ski, you put more bend into it, which allows the ski to now accelerate you centripetally towards that inner part of the circle more dramatically. And there's this virtuous cycle between those two forces. And so one of the challenges can be, how do you initiate it? There are kind of two ways to initiate a carving turn. One of them is you can try to initiate it by starting a skidding turn and then hope you can get because that'll at least give you an initial centripetal acceleration. You can start to bend the ski and then try to get the edge to grip and transition from skidding to carving. I find that to be pretty difficult. Like once the ski started to slide, it wants to keep sliding. So the more common, and I've seen this, and I've done it myself, especially in a steep slope, you'll sort of skid the first half of the turn and then kind of carve the second half. And it's a way to make it work. The more, I'll say, sort of kind of satisfying way is to find out, how do you initiate a carving turn at all? And this is like where we're talking about, you can just kind of like lean into it and hope. Again, one maybe piece of technical advice that I've received that I found really helpful is to start by thinking of it from a very bottom up perspective and say, okay, I'm standing on two skis. My feet are a little bit apart, so I'm balanced between them, and try to like consciously roll your ankles inside the ski boot to push both skis onto their edges before you lean. And you actually have to lean a tiny bit or you'll actually fall to the outside, because this will work. But especially thinking of the inside ski, the one that's, the leg that's on the inside of the direction you want to turn to, thinking consciously about laying that ski onto its pinky toe edge, its outside edge, and then the other ski will kind of naturally follow. Your body's weight will kind of fall to the inside, and this allows you to quickly but gradually enter that carving state where all those forces are in balance.
So there's one force that I'm not quite clear on. And I think the best way to ask about this is to imagine you're standing on a pair of skis on flat ground, not moving.
Yep.
If I simply lean to one side, I will fall to the ground.
Yes.
Right? Like eventually my center of gravity will no longer be above my abutments, my feet on the skis, and I'll just fall down.
Yep.
When I enter a turn, I can lean aggressively. Like I can probably lean to 45 degrees in a tight turn, and somehow I don't fall over.
Yep.
What is the force that is keeping me up? And by the way, that same force pushes me back to an upright state when I'm ready to be done with the turn.
Yeah. So that, I'm thinking and picturing the free body diagram in my head. I think that force is the centripetal acceleration force.
Ah, okay.
And centripetal acceleration can only happen when you have a forward velocity to begin with. Like it's a relative acceleration, it's a change of direction. Same thing happens on a bicycle. Like if you're on a bicycle, and in a track stand, you're going nowhere and you lean, you're falling over. Once you have some speed in the bike, you can lean into a turn and carve a turn with the bike that balances you out. And so I think skiing is the same way. Picture the centripetal acceleration as, again, let's make this left turn. The centripetal acceleration, I think, is taking place at the snow surface level. because that's where you're interacting with the snow, and that's what's resisting the motion outward of the ski and pushing it inward. Essentially, it's pushing, I think, perpendicular to your direction of travel toward the center of the circle that your arc would be tracing. So in this case, it'd be pushing straight left, like from right to left.
Okay.
And because it's doing so it's acting on your feet, like down at ground level, essentially it's like balance, sort of like how you can like balance a broomstick from below by pushing underneath as the broom is falling in one direction. Gravity is acting from your center of mass, which is somewhere up like in your core region. And so as you lean to the inside, gravity is now pulling your center of mass down, and once it's no longer pulling down through where your feet touch the ground, that's when you're unstable, you're going to fall over. But you have this centripetal acceleration at foot level pushing inward. And essentially the torque from gravity pulling down on your off-balance center of mass is going to be canceled out by the torque of the centripetal acceleration pushing inward at foot level, which would tend to stand you back upright. And those two torques, when they're in balance, you're holding the same angle of lean and you're all in control. If you lean too much, you're going to fall inward. If you don't lean enough, you'll sort of swing back outward. And you can control your lean. You can also, through the angle of your edge in the snow, you can control how much centripetal acceleration you're getting, or even by letting the edge like slide versus carve and grip. And so I suspect intuitively our bodies figure out how to do all this, and they actually figure out all that fine control, and we're almost not conscious of it. And we're like,
yeah.
And this is why I couldn't teach my friends to skate, is I was like, oh, if you want to stop, just like lean and dig your edges in.
Like, how do I do that?
Yeah. And I think macroscopically, we think about the lean because we kind of can picture our body and like, oh, I'm going to tip over. And meanwhile, your body is sort of like trying to make you not a fool. And it's like, oh, the ankle, know what I'm supposed to actually do here is like tweak some angles here to get enough grip, to get enough restoration force that this doesn't all end in a mess. And we're not even conscious of that.
Right. I mean, think about like if someone just pushes you from the back, and you don't expect it coming, your body is going to instinctively move your feet, at least one of your feet, forward in the motion of the fall.
Exactly.
Right. And it's like you didn't take a moment and think, okay, I've been pushed from the back, I'm falling forward. That's where I need to put my foot to brace. It's like, no, it just happens.
Totally. And this is why these things are a little hard to learn is, I suspect our body, and our nervous system and our muscles and all that, like they go through an adaptive training process where the repeated stimulus response and opportunity to try this, they dial in these control loops that just do the right thing for us. And, we think, oh, like this took a while. It was hard to learn. Well, yeah, it's actually amazing you could learn it at all, but your body is adapting and figuring it out.
Yes, it is amazing. It's like, wow, we could complain about how long it takes, or we could say, holy crap, it actually worked.
Yeah, the fact that it works at all is kind of a miracle.
Yeah, try building a robot that can do that. It's like nightmarishly hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's finally, like, I think people are getting good at that this decade, but, they've been trying to do this.
Yeah, but even still, even the best robots look like they're very unsteady. Like the best ones on Earth, when they walk, it's like, why are you walking like you're in so much pain?
Yeah, it's incredible how adaptive our human body is to conditions it had never seen before, and yet can develop these new control systems.
Yes, I think that's probably what makes life so amazing, because I'm quite certain that my ancestors from many generations ago never skied, but I learned how.
That's right.
Somehow.
But yeah, they probably did something. They're probably sliding down grass hills or something. I mean, I think these sort of flow state activities, they feel pretty universal, and we just have cool technology to enjoy them these days.
Yeah, it's like 7 different ways to enjoy a flow state where you can only focus on that one thing.
Yeah. Yep. And the other thing, when you make that turn, sorry, I'm just daydreaming about this and I'm so excited now.
I know.
But when you make that turn, now think about the vector sum of the gravity plus the centripetal acceleration. The vector sum, to be in equilibrium, it's going to pass from your feet straight through your center of mass on a diagonal. And that's how when you're in balance, and they're kind of canceling the torques out as a result, the torque that would make you fall inward or stand back upright. And B, that vector sum is greater than the individual components. And that's where you get that feeling of the G-forces or that increased pressure, which to me is part of what makes it really fun, is that feeling of that force coming back into your body.
Yeah. It's like the opposite of weightlessness. You're like heavier.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, somehow both feel good. Like it feels good to weigh less than we weigh or more, but I guess normal life is boring.
Exactly. Anything to take me out of the normal day to day.
That's right. Just make it different.
All right. Well, there's another whole category of things that I think we should talk about, which is the environment that we find ourselves in skiing.
All right. So which aspect are you thinking about?
People tell me that some snow is different from other snow. Like there's dry snow, there's wet snow, there's lake effect snow, there's snow that is famous for whatever reason. We happen to live in a state that claims to have the greatest snow. I don't know if that's a scientific category.
Yeah, it's definitely a marketing category. There is some scientific basis for saying we have good snow here in Utah. I should be careful how much I tout this. There are plenty of other places with great snow as well, so we'll be inclusive. But there's a few key properties.
Also, go ski somewhere else, right?
Yeah,
is
of course.
Kind of part? We already have enough crowding.
There you go. Yeah. Lift lines and so forth get a little bit fixed to resources, but yeah. Anyway, we encourage everyone to get out and enjoy the outdoors too, though. I think it's healthy for everybody. So yeah. I'm torn between my like altruistic desire for everyone to enjoy the life I enjoy and the reality that if everyone's enjoying the life I enjoy, it gets a little stuffy. So
yeah.
But there are some key properties to snow. The first one that's really important is the density of the snow. You know, liquid water is at its standard density, and ice, if you just freeze water, it's actually slightly less dense than water, which is why it floats, but it's close. But snow is kind of magical because snow is a mixture of water and air. And so I guess the snowflake itself, I mean, it's just ice, it's frozen water, but because it's not like a solid shape that would pack really densely, but you know, it's typically a flake of some kind, maybe star-shaped or needle-shaped. As the snow falls to the ground, it captures lots of air pockets within and around all of the snowflakes. And as a result, I'll say most fallen snow, fresh fallen snow, rule of thumb is think like 10% water, 90% air would be a typical density here. The snow we really love to ski in is lighter than that, or less dense than that, I should say, like 8.765%. Really, really super low density snow, what's sometimes called cold smoke, might be below 5%, like 3%. Water, which means you're talking like 95 to 97% air, which means, 20 times as much air as there is water, or 30 times as much air as there is water in a volume of fallen snow. That's going to be in the powder snow category, where you're skiing almost like in it. Like you're sort of within the snowpack. Your skis sink some distance down. You might want bigger, fatter skis to lower the surface pressure, or more surface area, lower the pressure so it can support you. And also, as you're moving through the snow, you get some of the same dynamic lift that sort of like water skiing gets, where the dynamic interaction as you flow over the snow, it essentially pushes back. I haven't studied this to see how much of this is just like a Newton's law, you're pushing the snow down, is pushing you back up, type of reaction. I assume that's what it is. But this allows you to float like in the snowpack as opposed to just on top of it. When the snow falls, you sort of want a little bit of both. You want ideally like a dense snow to fall at the bottom of the snowpack. This is a safer snowpack from an avalanche standpoint. It's going to cover rocks and trees and obstacles better. It's going to stick and hold itself together better. But if you get sort of some lightweight, lower density snow on top, that fluffy layer that you ski through, even as the lower layers are kind of supporting you, can give this really amazing kind of lower weight feeling, like this feeling of like floating or weightlessness almost. And that's part of what people get really excited about, is when you get that mix of densities leading to very low density on top. And we do get that here, for what it's worth, some of the time at least.
Yeah, after a fresh snowfall.
Yep. And so one question then would be, well, how do you get different densities of snow? And that tends to come down to the size and the shape of the snowflakes themselves, which is often dictated by the conditions of the clouds that produced and dropped the snowflakes. And simple rule of thumb is the closer you are to the ocean where that storm probably developed, the sort of more moist the air is, and as a result, the snowflakes tend to kind of come down a little warmer, like closer to the freezing temperature or melting temperature. They tend to clump together a little more readily, and so they'll tend to be more high density as fallen snow, like maybe that 10, 15, 20% snow water equivalent, they'll call it, or density compared to just water itself. As you move inland away from what they call the maritime climate zone into what they call a more continental climate zone, typically the storms are colder, the air is colder, the relative humidity is lower, and so there's kind of less moisture to work with, and as a result, you tend to get colder snowflakes that kind of grow more structure that keeps them separated as they fall and land and pack into the snowpack initially. And so that's when you have the lower density snow more typically falling inland. And again, that's how it falls. Over time, due to gravity, due to heat cycling, the sun shining on it, that snowpack will settle and become more dense. And so that'll increase the density. And then at like a ski resort, most ski resorts have some type of snow grooming or snow management equipment where they'll explicitly pack the snow down to kind of create a smoother riding surface, but also as a result, a denser one that your ski will sit on top of and let you, carve the edges into to have more control over your path. And so I don't know what the density of like groomed snow would be, but I mean, I would think you're getting into the 50% range, but I guess just a total guess. Maybe more.
Okay. Yeah, but the groomed snow, of course, has the advantage of not only the density being optimized, but also the surface is more consistent.
Yeah.
No big bumps.
Exactly. Yeah, there are many fewer surprises. It's going to be a much kind of overall, on a macro level, very smooth. And yeah, the modern machines are designed to kind of break apart like any ice chunks that might have formed when other people were skiing on the snow and leave a kind of a new surface ready to be skied afterward.
Okay. And what's your favorite kind of surface to ski on?
While I enjoy going fast and carving on the groomed, my favorite is deep powder. The deeper and lighter, the better, because to me, it becomes this 3-dimensional process where you feel like you're flying through a medium, and there's something about the feeling as it kind of hits your body, like the snow going over your knees and up like your waist or maybe all the way over your head. And there's a new dynamic when you're in deep powder snow, which is your skis have become submarines. So you had, maybe you had boats before that were on the surface, and now they're submarines, which means you have control not only over the turning, but also over their depth to a certain extent. And you can kind of bring them up or push them down. I feel like you sort of get this 3-dimensional flying sensation that just feels magical.
You have like airplane elevator authority now, like a pitch authority on
That's
it.
right. There is a pitch component to it. And it takes a little while to get used to and to learn how to use it. But yeah, it opens up even more kind of control possibilities.
Interesting.
The other thing is you now have a new source of drag. So we talked about air resistance. Yes. We talked about the sliding friction over the snow or your edges. Well, now just the snow medium you're moving through is going to increase drag.
And the deeper you are, the more drag it produces, right?
Yeah. And that means like on a deep powder day, and I remember the first deep powder day I ever experienced as a teenager, and like the moderate level slopes, the green or the blue level slopes were not steep enough to make forward progress, at least with the skinny skis I had back then. Modern fatter powder skis would have done okay with more flotation, but those didn't. And so you had to go to the steepest slopes on the mountain, the Black Diamond slopes, just to make headway.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And so part of the fun can be you can go ski something really steep, and as long as it's safe, avalanche safety is paramount in those circumstances, but as long as it's safe, you can get on a really steep slope. And if it's like near waist deep, you can just about go straight down, just a turn here and there how you want. And so you have this total freedom to just explore the mountain in a way that's hard to do when the snow is hard and you're going to go maybe faster than you can control on that same slope if you tried that on a non-powder day.
That's awesome.
And then if you fall, I mean, it feels like you just land in fluff, and that's just super fun too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what do you think, Dave? Any other burning questions on skiing, or is it time to get out and enjoy the snow.
I think we had some explaining to do. We did some explaining. I feel better about my understanding of all the different vectors involved and the physics involved. I have one last question.
Okay.
You mentioned that on ice skates, there is a hydroplaning effect because the metal high-pressure blade on the ice does indeed melt the ice and creates just a very thin layer of water that you're skating across.
Yeah.
Does that same phenomenon take place on skis?
I am not positive. I suspect it does under at least some circumstances. I don't know if it does always. But on very warm snow, like in the spring, I have seen, like, as someone has skied down a track, skied to their line, that you'll see like a glisten or a shine on the snow where their skis were. And there is now like a thin layer of ice that's formed, which implies to me that that snow melted and refroze. So
yeah,
I think under at least some circumstances it does. I don't know if it does all the time. And if there are other more of like in cold snow, especially like in powder, is it more like the snow granules are like rolling under your ski, like, providing more of like a mechanical bearing effect. But yeah, I think at least some of the time you're melting the snow as you go. Crazy, huh? I don't know.
That's very cool. Yeah. So basically snow skiing is water skiing, maybe.
Yeah.
But you're not being... The force that's pulling you is not a boat. It's gravity, and it's the tangent vector of the gravity vector.
Yeah. So maybe it's like surfing.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All of these things are the same sport.
Yeah. I love water in all its forms, especially snow, the mix of water and air.
One thing I've noticed about you, Shane, is you love fluid dynamics, and sometimes that's just air, sometimes it's water and air, sometimes it's just water.
That's true.
It's like whatever. I'll take all the fluids.
It's true. I'll take water in any phase. I've not experienced plasma. I'm sure that's fun too.
But open to it.
Yeah,
You're open to it. Water plasma.
There you go.
Not something you experience every day.
Yeah, as you say, hopefully not too often.
Yeah. The plasma.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Maybe just once.
Maybe just once. What a way.
Thank you, Shane. This has been super informative for me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise, Dave. And I can't wait to hear how your next carving adventure goes on skis.
Yes.
All right. See ya.